Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Next Level Success Roundtable. And today our topic is about sorries. And this is the week of Valentine's Day. So hopefully nobody has to say, I'm sorry. But if you do, it's a nice thing to know how to say, I'm sorry, to fix those relationships, whether they're business or personal. This is kind of a continuation of our topic from last week when we were talking about business relationships and personal relationships. And I'd like to start off by asking Tom. Tom, you had brought up some interesting points in our last discussion as far as the sorry. I think you said something about not all sorries are the same. So do
Correct.
you mind leading us into that?
Sure. When someone says they're sorry, there's always a context. If you bump into somebody at the store and you go, "Oh, sorry," that's acceptable. That's fine, and it's understood. You didn't intend it. On the other hand, if somebody's pounding on you and going, "Sorry," it's like, I don't think you're sorry. I think you intended that. and there's just this whole spectrum of things in between. And what I love to watch is on the TV when you're watching politicians, particularly, but they're not the only ones, and they attempt to express an apology, and they fail. They just fail, and they say things like, "Well, I'm sorry you were offended by that." In other words, I'm not accepting any responsibility. It's your sensitivity that caused the problem. But they think that's an apology, and it's not. See, a true apology tends to have a couple of parts to it. And one is an expression of remorse. And then the second part of it is to make sure that you accept the responsibility, which is part of the remorse. And a third part of it, and the most overlooked part of it, is a commitment in some degree to either correct systems or somehow make sure it doesn't happen again. And I've heard good apologies that include things like, "Well, I will make sure that I attend a class that enlightens me on this particular issue so that I don't make that mistake again. I don't do that faux pas." And that's a way to say, clearly it wasn't intentional, but nonetheless, I did what I did. And so I am remorseful. I am going to change my behavior. And this is how I take the responsibility to do that. But at the same time, we say things like, if you remember the movie, and I didn't like the movie, the actors, but this one line was great. Love means never having to say you're sorry.
It's like familiar. Well, what is it?
Love overcomes everything. And so there are times when you do something, and it's particularly true in the business arena, and you do something, and it was like, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. There's an episode of Big Bang where Bernadette signs a card that she thought was a retirement card. And it said, whatever you plan to do, I hope you're in a good place. Well, it turns out it was a get well card because she'd been in a car accident and she might not survive. It's just like, wrong greeting, wrong. And so there are times when you might do something, not that extreme, but you might do something that's just a little faux pas. So you send a fruit basket, you send coffee and donuts the next morning, and very often nothing has to be said. It's like, okay, you stepped on my toe, business-wise, didn't appreciate it, but you recognize what you did. I accept your apology, and you move on. I mean, you're not going to ruin a business relationship over those things. So that's why I say there's this entire spectrum of things. But the true apology contains those three elements that I mentioned, because without those, you have to question whether somebody truly is sorry or they're just going through the motions. And again, I could do the same thing with people and say, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry. It was my fault. I never should have done that. And so I'll do better in the future." And you hear people say those kind of things, you go, "Yeah, I'm not buying it. I'm not there yet." And so that's why I say it involves a lot of context in terms of whether it is truly sorry. Here's the proof. Does their behavior change? If their behavior doesn't change, they're not sorry. They didn't mean it, and they're going to continue to be a narcissistic bastard for the rest of their lives. And sometimes you have to accept people as they are. But that's the concept behind the idea that we were expressing last week.
That makes sense. I always use percentages. It's like if I go to the doctor and I say I'm in pain, they'll say, "Well, what's your pain threshold, 1 to 10?" I'll say it's about 5.74. They always look at me, "Can't you round it 5.8. No, it's not 5.8. It's 5.74. And I do the same thing with the sorries. I'll tell my husband. I've done this all our marriage. It's like I'm about 67% sorry. He's like, I don't want to hear it until you're 100% sorry. Otherwise, you're not sorry at all. So don't don't say you're 67% sorry. And it's interesting that you bring this up because I just recorded a podcast last night for a new podcast launch, Cappuccino Talks, and it's all about taking responsibility for your actions. And it actually is. Well, I won't ruin the fun as far as that podcast episode, but it has to do with saying sorry and taking responsibility. But Gail, thoughts?
Well, I think we have way too many people today that are never sorry, right? They're just hateful for I don't know why, and they're never sorry. They do whatever they want, and they don't even pretend they're sorry. They're just sorry people.
I agree with you, Gail. I think that's very true. And as I was saying about the narcissistic people, and it's always the me aspect of it. And I'm never wrong, of course. And so why should I ever apologize? There's a related saying that I heard. I actually looked it up, and it was somebody I'd never heard of who was quoted as saying this, but it was something my father actually told me. And his comment was, never explain yourself because your friends don't need it and your enemies won't believe it. And as I say, it turns out it was quoted years ago by somebody else. And I've given that one a lot of thought because there are times when you make a choice and somebody doesn't like your choice, but maybe they don't really have a dog in that race. And so I'm not going to explain myself. This is what's best for me. This is what I'm going to do and offer no explanation. And your enemies aren't going to believe you anyway. And your friends say, okay, I trust your judgment. That's why I'm your friend, because I trust you. And so I think that's a dimension of this as well that can influence the way people feel about it and how you go about building relationships or destroying them.
I thought of that. That reminds me of something my father used to tell me. What is it? You can please please all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time. But that wasn't it. It was another one. He said something about all the people care or something about caring and loving. I wish I could remember the quote because it made a lot of sense, and now I can't quote him. But it's along the same lines as what you're saying, Tom. That it makes you think as far as the people that really do care about you, love you anyway, no matter what,
Right,
and
but
the others aren't going to.
I don't. I think what Tom's talking about though is something that you decide that you don't really need to say you're sorry for because it's not like you're doing something you shouldn't have done. You're just doing what you wanted to do, which hopefully wasn't mean to anybody else. But have
Right.
you ever noticed the flip side of the narcissist? The people in the relationships with the narcissist say sorry for everything,
Mm-hmm.
even though it has nothing to do with them. They just automatically say, I'm sorry all the time for everything because they, were raised by or are in a relationship with a narcissist who's never sorry for anything. So it's always their fault. So they always say, I'm sorry, even if it's not their fault. And they know it's not their fault.
They're the
And
narcissistic supply, so
yeah,
they've been
we do.
trained and groomed.
Deb, you may know more about this because of your work in the PTSD community, but that is a trauma reflex.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find somebody who is constantly apologizing, and I confess, sometimes to the point of irritation, it's like, look, that's not a sincere apology. You're just saying it. And it's a habit, clearly, but it's a triggered habit. And so I want to try to help you get away from that. It's not your responsibility. If it's not your responsibility, you have no reason to be sorry. That gets us back to the, I'm sorry you're a jerk. No, I'm not really sorry, but I'm making a point here that it's your responsibility to extend the apology. But that's why I say you have to look at the context of every single one of them. And when you talk and say that word, have it have meaning. When we start misusing the words, they lose their meaning. And that's sad. And an apology and a thank you are two things that I think, and I even wrote about it in the book, but a leader must be able to say effectively, sincerely, I'm sorry and thank you.
Now, what do you think about this trend? And by the way, I love your point as far as the being trained in the trauma response. That is a whole nother, I think, 2-hour podcast. I could go another direction, but I'm gonna skip that right now. But valid point, Tom. What do you think of this current trend where it seems like I'm hearing from more and more people and more companies, and I don't know if it's a cultural trend, but this thing where it's like, do not say thank you, do not say please, do not. I mean, my husband has heard it from his company where they don't want him to take the time to put it in a text message to say thank you to anyone in the company because it takes too much time. It takes too much as far as characters on the text. I was like, so you don't want him to be polite? Is
Yuck.
this what is that?
That's terrible, and they're not paying by the letter. So I mean, it'd be different if they were paying by the letter and they needed to cut corners, right? But even then, it would be a stupid decision. I The world has gone off its rails, and that's a really good example of something that's, let's just make the world a more evil, nasty place. That's illogical. That doesn't even make any sense.
That's what I think too.
It's funny you mentioned this. I hadn't even really thought about it in this context, but one of the classes I teach often is on ethics. And that covers a broad range of things. And I remember a particular slide I have in the presentation that talks about social niceties. And so if you don't hold the door for somebody, is that rude? Or is that, again, part of the circumstances? And if you look at fashion choices, is that really an ethical issue? Well, it depends in how far you take it, and so the he said, she said issues where, well, the way she was dressed, she was asking for it versus this is a business and, we try to have a little bit of decorum about such things. And where do you draw that line? It's difficult. It's very difficult. And in that context, when I teach about it, it says, are these really ethical issues or are they more the social norms? And do we see a deterioration in society if, in fact, we start to abandon the social norms? I think that people that do as your husband's employer seems to be doing are damaging society. I know that's rather extreme, but when you put it all together, I think it's a negative on society.
The problem is the social norms. It's like I once got in a very public debate on Twitter when someone it was a business website. I was feeding their content to Twitter. And one day a post went to my feed that had the F word in the title. And so I immediately deleted it. And then I deleted him from my feed and I called him on it. I said, what are you thinking? You are a business website. It is inappropriate, right? There used to be something called Polite Company. And in Polite Company, we don't really want to see the F word in the title. And then it got worse because then I looked at the post and the post was pornography.
Whoa.
Right. So I don't know what was worse, the F in the title or the pornographic part of the content. And his defense was, you have to let the writers be true to their own selves. I said, okay, where are you going to draw the line? If the next writer wants to put like real hardcore pornography in their post, is that okay? This is a business site. What has that got to do with this? Right?
That's my question. Yeah, exactly.
And it was so funny. It was like 50%. And I didn't even know because they were using my initials, but people that knew who they were talking about notified and let me know that they were talking about it. So 50% of the people were with me. It's inappropriate. And the other 50% were, the comment that really stuck in my mind was that when people drop the F-bombs, that gives them automatic credibility in my book, is what this person said. I went, really? It gives them automatic delete in my book because I don't want to see it. It's like Twitter or Facebook has those little videos, right? And I might have liked somebody, but like there was yesterday, this little one of those, there's 4 pictures. One is you don't really want to see. And then there's 3 other ones. 2 of the 3 were this woman falling out of her top, right? Once or twice, I could deal with that. Over and over and over. I'm like, no. Then I go find the page and I unlike it. And then I send them a comment. So the reason I unliked your page, which is normally full of great stuff, is that you have this little video showing up. That's this woman with an imaginary shirt on. I mean, it was like ridiculous. It wasn't like low cut, it was ridiculous, right? It was like, uh, is that like photoshopped? Because that's really way too low to not be showing something else, right? It's just like, I don't know. I'm too old for it. I don't want to see it, right? I don't want to see your thong behind in my feed. I don't want to see it, right? And I'm not like, I wasn't a prude. Now I'm a very big Christian, so I really don't want to see it. But back then it was just like, even back when I wasn't, I still didn't want to see it, right? I don't want to see, and I don't really want to see guys with their six packs either. I mean, I like guys and I like male bodies, but I don't need that, and I don't need photos of that, right? It's just, especially if they're kids, they're like 20. Like,
It's an interesting story because I think it's more common because I had a nearly identical situation, but it introduces another aspect as well. A friend of mine posted an article, and I think it was on LinkedIn, and it was a very vanilla title. But as I started reading it, it had the F word all through it. And what I should have done was reached out to her because, I know her. We're close friends, but we knew each other. And I should have written to her separately and said, what's going on here? Why would you post such a thing? But instead, I reacted viscerally and I put in the feed and I said, there are ways to make this point without dropping so many F-bombs. And it seems unwise to taint the point of the article, which was not a bad point, with that. And she wrote back to me, "How dare you call me out in public? And I said, well, why did you post that?
In public.
Exactly.
And I said, she says to me, well, I didn't read the article. I don't have time to read everything I post.
Wait.
And I was like, okay.
Didn't she?
Oh.
I said, okay, fine.
It wasn't her article. She was
posting somebody else's article. Yeah.
Okay.
And I said to her, okay, I will extend an apology to you because, yes, in hindsight, I should have called you out privately, not publicly. On the other hand, I'm not going to apologize because you posted something that damaged your brand and you shouldn't have done that. And I don't think your readers appreciate it. And we're still friends to this day. But at that point in time,
gone at that point and deleted it, and your comments would have gone with it.
She did.
See that people need to be more careful. But the younger people, they don't know any better. They really don't. There was this young girl. She was looking for a job, and I was trying to help her. And then one day, her logo, her image photo changed to her in an extremely suggestive position in a bikini. And we talked all the time, and I said, hey, why? I said, you're trying to get hired. Why would you put a picture like that? I said, they live forever on the internet, right? Why did you do that? She was mad at her boyfriend and she wanted to make him jealous. So she was young and silly and didn't know any better. But I'm like, it's inappropriate and it's going to follow you and haunt you for the rest of your life online. And so you should be more thoughtful and careful. But honestly, these people, half of the world doesn't understand polite company, appropriate language, right? It's like I said to him about the F word. I says, look, if you're out on the town with your drunken buddies, that's one thing. But you wouldn't talk like that to your grandmother, I hope, right? Or in church. Well, there's a difference. There's work and there's family and there's, your buddies who hopefully what stays with the buddies doesn't get back to anybody else. I don't understand it, but now it's so awful, right? And they have no idea. I mean, the tattoos, the piercings, the colored hair. I mean, at least some of the colored hair will wash out, but the rest of the stuff, right? And that's going to be a big thing because now half the world thinks having your body covered in tattoos is normal, and the other half still cringes every time they see it, right?
I think we're losing our balance culturally.
Well, no, the problem is we're now so far apart that there is no bridging that gap, right? And if you're all in on full body tattoos everywhere, except maybe not your face, some people don't go totally there, they're
Some
kind of
people do.
stuck with it, except unless they want to try to remove them, and that's really expensive and painful and stuff. And so I think that sometimes people would have gotten older and wiser, but they did something so permanent that it's hard to change your mind. Like when we were young, you might have done something stupid, but 10 years later, it's just a forgotten memory. And unless somebody had a photo or a video, it's nothing. Now there's photos and videos of everything everyone ever does, right? And people
Mhm.
have like I was never crazy, right? I never got drunk. My limit was one wine cooler, right? I mean,
You're a good girl.
well, no, it was a practical thing, right? If we
Mhm.
went out dancing on a Friday night and I had one wine cooler and we stayed, we get money's worth. You go when they open and you leave when they close, right? Then you're no good for most of Saturday. You don't feel like doing anything. And so it wasn't a good trade off to me. I love to go dancing, but then I didn't get anything done on Saturday and I didn't like that. And I don't understand getting drunk any more than I understand getting stoned. I don't understand. So, but now people behave in manners that are totally bad. I mean, not just like the misbehavior, I mean, like evil, nasty bad, demonic bad. And they don't have a clue. They don't have any idea. The divide is so wide now that I don't think you can fix it. And the time is coming when, like, the goats and sheep are separated. There is You have to make a decision now. You have to decide which side you're on, right? That's why so many Christians you didn't even know were Christians are now out, right? Now they are, because it got to where they couldn't like ignore it anymore,
Mhm.
or they just won't do it. It's like the pronoun thing, right? If you have pronouns on your profiles, that puts you in a certain camp, right? And some people will applaud you and other people will avoid you. But there are
That's very
people that
true.
do that. The people with the pronouns, though, they don't know that that's making people avoid them. They have no idea, because there is media coverage that says, like, one person wrote that they didn't want to put their pronouns on their emails because they felt that would cost them customers and sales. And it will. But they wrote, this got covered in some mainstream media thing. And the mainstream answer was, oh, no, it'll never do that. It won't affect your sales or your relationships, right? It's a good thing. Everyone should do it. And so, no, that's not really true. They lied to that person. The person is correct, right? You're either in the pronoun camp or I don't think I want to interact with that person, right? Like, I got a request from someone who is a partner of someone else that we know, and he had a pronouns on his LinkedIn profile, and I went, and he sent me a connection request, and I had to think hard on that one. And I said, well, I'll make an exception for you, but
Well, Gail, I agree with everything you just said. And by the way, in the interest of full disclosure, my daughter is a tattoo artist. She's a very good artist. And her dad sent her through 12 years of undergraduate school to get her art degree. But nonetheless, she
wow.
did finally graduate. And,
She is very talented.
She's a tattoo artist out there. Now,
I saw her work.
Along
she is
those
very
lines,
talented.
remember too that there was a phase, and I don't know if it's still existent, but there was a phase where employers demanded that you give your pronouns so that everybody could honor them.
It was the corporate thing, yes.
Yeah, and I do know there were some people who had them on their profiles, and I would ask if there was close enough friend to them, and I'd say, why do you do that? Just curious. I'd like to know what motivates you. And some of them were like, oh, it's a human identity thing, and it's like, okay, fine, that's your opinion. You're entitled to it. I'm somewhat of a libertarian in that regard. Believe whatever you want to, but Gail, I'm with you in the sense of I don't accept such things from people who include pronouns in their email, on their profiles, or whatever it is, because it's a red flag for the more aggressively hardcore people in that area. And quite bluntly, I don't have time for it. I got better things to do with my time.
Right.
But going back
to they've bought in on all the Kool-Aid, and I don't know that I don't want to have debates over all that stuff all the time. I
had a friend who actually said to me one time, he said, no, I I like girls that have their pronouns in there. And I go, why? He said, because they're easily brainwashed. And that's the kind of girl I like. You know, it's like, okay, the
Yeah.
society again is just going south on us fast. But I'm not a big fan of tattoos either, because, or the piercings, the other things that you mentioned. I guess I've just grown up with this sense of natural beauty, and we look the way we look, and we are the way we are. And by the way, our looks change over the course of our life. I mean, there's this old fat guy who is photobombing my mirrors, and it's really ticking me off. But the point is that if I see, you know, a young attractive girl, say, and she's got the nose ring and the lip ring and the thing on the side of the nose and all this, and I look at her and I'm like, I want to appreciate her for the person she is. But all I see, my eyes are drawn to that focal point. And it's like, okay, that's totally distracting from who this person really is.
Exactly.
And again, I realize that's my view and that's my
No, it's
opinion, and
right.
other people
It's
can disagree.
No,
And
it's
you're welcome to do
distracting.
whatever you want with your body. Not my choice, it's yours. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to judge them. And they can judge me in return. And back to our theme, I'm not going to apologize for it.
Right.
That's probably a good
See, that's what I'm saying. Now I'm not going to apologize for not using pronouns, and I can't use if you want to think you're a cat or whatever, I can't go along with you because that's not reality. Early on, a marketer that I really respected who writes some really great stuff was doing a survey on Twitter, and I clicked onto the survey, and one of the very first questions was, what gender do you primarily or most identify with? And I went, I'm out. And I sent her a message and I said, really? It's a marketing survey. And she goes, well, what problem do you have with that question? And I said, well, other than it has no basis in reality, right? I mean, that's my problem with it. It has no basis in reality. And so I don't want to discuss that. So I lost respect for her because she's going along with this thing, right? That so many people are going along with, and I just can't go along with it. And so that's what I'm saying. Society is now so polarized. You've got the people that bought into that and the people that didn't, right? And there's not any common ground to be found, right? I mean, like Tom and I were going to say, okay, your body, do your thing, but but we're not going to apologize for not appreciating the distractions you choose to put on yourself, right? I mean, I'm not trying to tell them not to do it. I'm just saying
your distraction.
I don't get it, right? And I don't apologize for not getting it because I guess I don't want to get it. I feel sorry for them. I really do. And I'm sure they don't appreciate that, but I do. I feel sorry for them. And I know this is super controversial and we're going to freak a lot of people out. I know an inordinate amount of people married to someone the same sex as they are, or they claim to be married. And I don't know how that happened. How did all that happen? That was not in my generation. I knew nobody. I'm sure there were some people, but they didn't like make it public, so you didn't know that they were. But now there's so many people.
Is it the cool
And
thing,
so,
or is it just all of a sudden now
well, now it's like the trans thing. The trans thing is how you take someone who used to be the odd kid out and make them a star, right?
Hmm.
It's like when the mean girls make you one of their own, right? And you become a mean girl, right? But you're at the bottom of the totem pole. That's what they did. They made it cool. They made it not cool to be a normal kid struggling to fit in junior high or high school, and very cool to be anybody that claims there's something different, anything different, right? And so they made it cool, and now there's all these people with all these regrets and all these permanent problems. And it's sad. It's really sad, but we can't do anything about it, right? That is social media and intentional manipulation is what that is. That did not naturally happen.
I remember someone making a comment about tattoos, and specifically the tattoo on the back referred to as a tramp stamp, which the name itself should give you some clue how a lot of people view that. And their question was, so what's their back going to look like in 60 years? I was like,
least it's
oh, that's not cool.
At least it's somewhere it'll be covered up most of the time.
It could be covered up, yes.
All the other places people are tattooing now. Like I've seen a lot of like wedding parties blowing up because some people think the tattoos should show and some people don't want the tattoos to show. And now you have this big conflict, right? I saw one recently where the bride wanted them to buy this really expensive makeup to cover up the tattoos. Apparently it's possible to cover them up temporarily. And the other people didn't want to spend the money and they were proud of their tattoos. And so then
wow.
like they weren't bridesmaid anymore. They like got bounced from the wedding party.
It's interesting, and we could spend more time in a future show on tattoos because they have a very long history. The Egyptians did tattooing, and even in the Bible, there's references to followers of Christ should not get tattooed. Well, actually, it was in the Old Testament. I correct that. It was in the Old Testament. They talked about tattoos are not allowed. You shouldn't have tattoos. And again, contextual. But more importantly, there's a really dark side to tattoos. Excuse me. If you recall, during the Holocaust, the people who were sent to the camps and sent into the ovens were all branded with a tattoo. They all had a number tattooed on them so they could be kept. They didn't have a name. They didn't have an identity. They had a number. And that's one aspect of it. And even today, with the terrible scourge of human trafficking, and I was listening to a news article today about some of the young girls, when they come across the border, they're already tattooed behind the ear to identify which cartel they belong to. And so again, we could go into great detail on all of that, but it's not an insignificant thing, is my point.
That's the people awful. Don't get it, right? There's also girls that belong to people that were branded, right? And so they don't understand, right? That's like branding and tattooing is a sign of somebody owning you. And it's just like that Empire thing that was hot for a while. I'm like, you're buying shares in people. That's offensive to me.
Empire Avenue?
Never would join that. Empire Avenue. I thought that was really offensive.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, if you get everybody to think tattoos and piercings are normal, it's way easier to get them to take the chip, the mark, right?
Easily brainwashed.
Normalized altering your body, right? And now they're trying to like slip it in. Where is someplace you can pay with your hand? Like you don't even need the chip to pay with your hand, right? That's getting people used to the idea that they're going to be
prophecy.
Microchipped. I will not chip anything. In fact, I quit registering my thoroughbred horses because I will not allow them to be chipped. There's problems with health issues from chipping animals, cancers and tumors and various other things that people want to ignore, right? Except for they occur right where the chip is. So, I mean, it's not like it's not obvious what the problem is. I won't chip them. And at one point in Texas, they tried to get everyone to voluntarily register their premises and identify their animals and then have to go online and report every time they moved an animal off the property. Now, the horse people took offense and raised holy hell, and that got backed off, at least for the time. I don't know if it's been implemented since then or not, but they make things voluntary till they get some kind of traction, and then they'll make it mandatory. The horse people said, so if I want to get on my horse and ride to my next door neighbor's house, I have to go online and report that I'm going to take my horse to the next door neighbor's house. Or if I have to take the horse to the vet, it's an emergency. First, I have to go online and notify the system that I need to take my horse to the vet, right? And horse people, they trail ride, they go to the vet, they go to shows, they go to rodeos, they go to barrel races. The horse people were not having it. And that's how it got stopped, right? The cattle people probably wouldn't have said that much because, you only move them when you get them and when you sell them, right? You don't move them on a daily basis like some horses move. But they wanted to do that, And my first thought was, if they have a database that you can register an animal in, it would work perfectly fine for tracking humans.
Agreed.
Wow.
And that is the slippery slope that they're putting people on.
Yep. Well, I think we've come up to our 20-minute and our 30-minute wrap-up point. So I think we have about 15 different great ideas for future topics. And I want to thank both of you for wonderful ideas and wonderful discussion on the I'm sorry's and beyond. So thank you for joining. And thank you for tuning in on Next Level Success Roundtable. And we will see you next week, same time, same place.
Bye.